have the, sorry, just one moment, just to let you know as well, obviously that the session is going to be recorded. So we have the honor of having 4 subject matter experts who will be speaking around topics on gender, women's economic empowerment and financial inclusion, and will offer further recommendations based on the expertise and also an understanding of the current status of women's economic empowerment across Kenya. So the primary objectives of this learning session today are to showcase evidence on inclusive financial inclusion interventions that are making a difference for women across Kenya. The second is to discuss implementable strategies to move financial inclusion for women beyond access to use. And of course, that's premised on the understanding of women's different intersectionalities and how that influence them in different ways and so forth, and affects the different and diverse needs as well. So that's a little bit of an introduction to the session today. I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping first, if that's all right. I'll just start by saying that, first of all, if everyone could have, just make sure that you're on mute, apart from the presenters while they're speaking. We will also encourage you, please, to introduce yourselves in the chat box, where you are located, what you do, and the organization that you're from, if it's relevant. Announce a session. Of course, this is being recorded, as I've just mentioned, and it'll be shared with you or via the www.we.copkenya.org website, as well as the We COP YouTube channel. We also, of course, encourage you to sign up for that to the website and subscribe to the YouTube channel for unlimited access. If you want to send your questions, which will be answered later on after the presentations, please do so via the chat box. So I'll just give a very quick overview of the agenda and the structure for this session today. We're just concluding the welcome and the agenda setting. Then we'll have the presentations from the partners on financial inclusion, which are covering different topics around the subject. We will then have insights from our financial inclusion expert and discussant, who would have captured the key learnings and the key insights and built on those from the presentations. Then we'll have a Q&A where we'll have the opportunity to present your questions to the different presenters, for which hopefully will be a rich discussion. And then we'll follow that with a wrap up and summary of the session and closing. Thank you. So if we can start next, please. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Caroline Mutwiri, who is a gender statistician from Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Just a little bit about Caroline. She, of course, has a wealth of experience in research and data management, and as a strong advocate for gender equality. Caroline champions for the use of statistics to inform gender inclusive policies and programs. We welcome you today, Caroline. You'll be speaking on the state of financial inclusion in Kenya. Thank you very much for your time today and welcome.
Okay, so I thank you very much, Rhoda, for the wonderful introduction. So I hope I'm audible enough. And I would ask, if allowed, I have my video off, please. Yes, so as you've heard, I'm Carol from KNBS. and I work as a gender statistician. Essentially, mine is just to ensure that gender statistics or gender perspectives are integrated into what we produce as a National Statistical Office. So to our topic of today, our topic of discussion. So quickly is just to appreciate the role of financial inclusion as a key driver of economic growth and poverty reduction. But essentially what you're looking into is equitable economic growth. And this entails, economic that benefits all segments of the society. And to be specific, not leaving anyone behind, those who are marginalized or disadvantaged. But we all know that there exist gender, gaps in financial inclusion, as research says from different various data that's available, whether it's from the National Statistical Offices or the civil society organizations. So our data is showing that there are a lot of gaps that are basically not really, favoring the women. But we all know that gender statistics is very important, or gender data is very important, that is used to highlight these gaps, as well as also assisting in addressing, these particular issues. So one of the importance of having gender statistics or having a gender perspectives into financial inclusion, data is to help the policymakers to be able to design, and monitor policy interventions, that will be able to address the gender issues. Additionally to that is also to have the financial service providers understand the nature of gender financial inclusion gaps. So, and to have to have equitable financial inclusion, it is also important to be able to create, a more gender inclusive financial system that is able to address the specific demand and supply of the barriers that are faced, particularly by women in terms of financial inclusion. And some of these barriers could be as, as basic as opening of accounts, or also as more structural constraints, as lack of assets that could be used as collateral. And also in addition to ensuring an equitable financial inclusion, there's need to also have an inclusive regulatory environment on that. So quick to what KNBS does onto this particular topic. So Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, we are the principal agency for the government in terms of production and use of statistics in general, that is official statistics. And we have several surveys that address financial inclusion issues. But in particular, there's what you call the Fin Access Survey, next slide, that has majority of indicators of data or information that addresses financial inclusion related elements. So the Fin Access Surveys, this is a survey that has been done every 2 to 3 years since 2006 and has been done, as you can see from the slides, from 2006. The next one was done in 2009, then 2013, 2016, 2019, 2021, and currently there are plans to undertake a similar survey in 2024. So the survey is done to just enhance financial inclusion measurements, to provide indicators to track progress in financial inclusion in the country. And then this is a collaboration efforts between the CBK, that is the Central Bank of Kenya, KNBS, Financial Sector Deepening Trust, that is FSD, Kenya, and other key public and private sector stakeholders. And this ensures that we have all buy-in into all these stakeholders, And the survey seeks to address information at household level on access, usage, and quality of financial services and products in the country. So one thing to note is 4 critical dimensions that the survey, addresses in terms of access. And by access is just ensuring that data is captured for individuals who have an active account in their own name in the last 12 months, and with at least one financial service provider, whether it's formal or informal. We discuss about the formality issues later on. And when you talk about usage, is the actual use of these accounts by these individuals in the last 12 months. And the survey also looks at the quality perspective. This is where the financial products or services, whether they are appropriate and whether they match individuals' needs. And lastly, it also looks at the impact stroke welfare, Impact in this instance, this just captures the outcome or welfare gain in the use of financial services and products. And I'll be able to show a few statistics based on these four elements or four dimensions. Yes. Next slide, please. So this slide just speaks about the objectives of the survey, and specific objectives, whereby the main aim of Fin Access surveys is just to monitor developments and progress that is achieved in the country, in the financial sectors, which essentially just enables the policymakers, the industry players, to have an understanding on the inclusivity and overall dynamics, in the financial landscape in the country. So highlighted in the slide are some of the outputs from the survey, which can easily be found in the report. I'll have a link to the report whereby we can all look at that, but quickly, if I just mention, just to enhance financial inclusion measurement using the demand size data. Secondly, to provide indicators that track the progress and dynamics in the financial inclusion landscape. Third, to support evidence-based decision-making on financial inclusion perspective. And then second, last, to have data that stakeholders, including policymakers, can use and researchers. And lastly, just to enable inter-country comparison on financial inclusion. So the next set of slides will show some key selected, statistics based on the four dimensions as highlighted below. So our first, the first in terms of findings from the 2021 Fin Access Survey is what is called access to financial services. If you look at that slide, you have three sort of segregation or disaggregation in terms of access to the services. You have the formal, informal, and those who are excluded. So when we talk about formal financial, services, these are services whereby whether they are regulated or supervised, financial service providers. And at the look of the statistics, if you look at the slide, if you look at the first graph or line graph, in 2006, there's a bit of a gap between the two sexes on the proportion of individuals who had access to formal financial services, that is those which are regulated. And this has been going up over time, but the gap has been narrowing slowly. And in 2021, the differentials between the two sexes is not really that much. That is a difference of about 4 percentage points. So we have been doing well over time, but also something to note is more males have access to formal financial services compared to the females over time. The next graph on that slide talks about informal financial services. And as you can see, the proportion of women over time has been higher in terms of access to this particular type of services compared to that of the men. But yes, this has been dropping over time, a good indication again. But then again, the gap as well is narrowing, with time. 2021, you can see the gap is approximately 3 percentage points. And lastly, we have that graph down there that is written excluded. So this is the proportion of individuals who have no access to financial services and products, who from formal and informal. So these individuals, either they access their financial services from social networks, or rather they do not completely have any access. So social networks such as the family, neighbors, friends, etc., even keeping money in a secret places. So these are the individuals portrayed in that particular graph. But again, a nice indication that the proportions have been going down. But however, looking at 2019 and 2021, there's a slight increase in that. Again, women are also not doing well if you compare with the other sex. The proportion is a bit higher compared to men. So that is just a quick overview on access to financial services based on whether they are formal services, whether they're informal financial services, or whether they are actually excluded to access either formal or informal services. So next slide, please. So the next slide just briefly highlights, use of financial services by the service providers. As the first slide had alluded in terms of access. So when you look at the use in the informal groups, majority of the individuals who used the financial services, sorry, the informal groups were women. If you look at the first graph, the first bar there, up there. So the males, it's 21%, and then the women is up to 6%. So more of women are, or rather they used, informal groups as a service provider. And then when you look at other more or less formal services, across board, from SACCOs, insurance, banks, and mobile money, it's more of the males that are. So it's more of the males that are, the proportion for males is higher compared to that of women. So next slide, we'll talk about what? Next slide, let's talk about, using of savings and credit. So in terms of savings and credits, we can see that if you look at the sexes, so it's more men from 2006, 53% and 51% of women. And then in 2021, you also have a slightly higher proportion of men who have actually used at least one saving or deposit instrument for that particular year. And when you look at the credit side as well, at least use of at least one credit product by sex, the pattern is the same, whereby it's more of the male than the female from 2006. So nothing has really changed, but apart from the fact that, the proportions have actually increased, or rather the percentages have actually increased. So again, 2021, in terms of using of credit products, we have more males using that compared to females, although the difference is not, again, that much. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a slide on quality. So source of financial advice, that is financial literacy. So this particular chart or graph shows the different source of financial advice by sexes for the last 2 FinAccess surveys. So in 2021, we can see that women, 50% of women who were interviewed for that survey got their financial advice from family and friends. And in the same particular year, so majority of men, that is approximately 48%, that is 47.8%, almost half of the proportion of men, they actually advise themselves, they never sought advice, financial advice from anyone else other than themselves. So those are the quick picks from that particular group. But if you look at formal financial institution, that is the second last category from the ground or Chama group. So in 2019, in 2021, it's also more men who sought financial advice from the formal financial institution. So our next slide, it's talking about financial literacy again. So please, next slide. But this is the knowledge on transaction costs and also knowledge on how to compute interest on loans. So what happened is respondents were actually shown a typical message on the mobile phone that showed the transactional value through an SMS on a cost. But the results show that men could actually correctly read the SMS and interpret the SMS compared to women, that is 61.6%. And this is from 2021 survey, FinAccess survey. And majority of women could not read the SMS, compared to men, that is 18.8, as you can see on the far end bar, compared to women 12. Sorry, yeah, compared to men, which was lower, 12.4%. So there's that disparity in who is able to read or how to know the transaction cost between the two sexes. The other end of the slide shows the knowledge of computation of interest on loan. So again, during the survey, so the population or the respondents were tested on the ability to how to accurately, I think, compute 10% interest on 10,000 loan. So slightly, again, more men compared to women were able to correctly know the answer. So they computed and they knew the answer compared to women, 44%. Those who didn't know, majority were women again compared to men. And those who had incorrect answers, again, majority were women compared to men. As you can see, 34%, 31%. Next slide, please. So this slide is on debt stress, those who had defaulted on a loan, which was existing 12 months prior to the survey. So majority again were women, 58% compared to men, 56%. If you look at the bars below, it's on the debt repayment that is greater than 50% of your monthly expenditure, such a burden in a household. So again, more men compared to women, 21% versus 17%. Those who had a debt that was higher, that was 50% higher than their monthly expenditure. So next slide on the quality. So this slide is on coping mechanisms, on the action taken by the borrowers to repay loans. You see there are no major differentials so much between the sexes. So as you can see on who started a business or working more hours, who reduced the expenses on food, the expenses on non-food items, sold or gave assets belongings, higher for women compared to men, used their savings. So basically majority of the responses on how they were coping in terms of paying for the loans, they all used their savings. So 42, or rather 43 for women and 44 for men. And then borrowed to repay loan, you can see the percentages on the screen. So next slide, please. So quick indicator on gambling, more men are gambling compared to women, 19% versus 9% on women. So proportion of individuals engaged in betting. And those who thought the perception in terms of gambling. So men, again, more men think that gambling is a good source of income. Interesting. And in women, it's 8%. Next slide. So quick display of priority list. If you can look at the priority list, so on all that list of the priority list, so where we are having more men than women is on buying land. So the proportion of men whose priority is buying land is higher compared to that of women, although again, it's not really that much. All other priority lists, the proportion of women is higher compared to men. Okay, so please next slide. So a lot of this is available in the report. So I'm just trying to sort of just go quickly. And then when we look at the impact, the financial needs, whether the needs of these individuals are met. So 61% of men reported that the day-to-day needs, they need are met compared to 64% of women, but meeting of the future goals. So the proportions sort of just swap. It's higher for men compared to women, as you can see on the slide. I think this is either the second last on financial health. So financially health individuals. So sadly, this has been dropping over time. So financial health is just derived using 3 key components: the ability to manage day-to-day needs, the ability to cope with shocks, and also the ability to invest in future goals. So 19% of women are financially healthy compared to 15%. Sorry, 19% of men are financially healthy compared to 15% of women. So more men are financially healthy compared to women. So yes, and the sad story again is this has been dropping over time. Lastly, on findings is the perceptions on financial status. So how do individuals responded on what they feel their financial status is? So if you look on the proportion of those who thought their financial status has worsened, so this has actually increased over time. So 2016, This was 32 for men and 37 for female, but in 2021, this shot to 74% for male and 73% of the female. So again, really something to be worried about. So the other indicators on that particular slide is just the thought that their financial status has remained the same, and the thought that their financial status had improved. So yes. So essentially, those are just quick statistics from the FinAccess 2021 report, which has some statistics again on trend analysis from 2006 to 2021. And there's more to that. Next slide. So there's more to that. If you visit our website, you can actually learn more. But quick recommendations from this from a gender perspective. So there's a need to conduct an in-depth gender analysis from the FinAccess dataset. These are very rich datasets with a lot of information, and also trend analysis, county level statistics, area of residence. There's just so much to do with that, with those particular datasets. And I think I mentioned this, that currently there are plans to conduct the 2024 FinAccess. But I believe my colleague Lucas is here with us, so he can be able to speak more about this. So he is in the core team that is planning for this, implementing for this, and any other quick technical questions in terms of the financial access survey in general. Yes, next. So this is where you can get next. So this is where you can get this. On the far right-hand side, you can see our website. You can go to the data sharing platform, and you can also go to the website on the publications to look at the publications. So these are the partners on the FSD. I'm not going to mention them. Yes, I think that's it from my side, Rhoda. I hope I'm not taking a lot of time, sorry. That is it from my end.
Thank you very much, Caroline.
A quick mention on this slide, sorry. So in addition to the FinAccess survey, you know, if you go through some of these surveys, you can get some indicators on financial inclusion perspective. The DHS has some 2 or 3 indicators. Kenya Continuous Household Survey Program, we piloted, or rather we are implementing a module on women's economic empowerment and has some set of questions. That is on 2021, has some set of questions on financial inclusion, MSME survey, Kenya Integrated Household Budget Service. So there's more, but the FinAccess is the one that has majority of this information. All right, so thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Caroline. There's quite a lot of findings that have sort of sets the scene really and gives us a bit of an understanding of you know, the overall status and where the gaps are and what the opportunities are for looking at more focus on financial inclusion. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Mr. Moses Okello, who is joining us as a Women's Economic Empowerment Lead from the Center for Rights Education and Awareness, which is KRU Kenya. A little bit about Moses. He is a leader on women's economic empowerment and develops and implements integrated approaches that empower female entrepreneurs. Moses is also a co-chair of the Women's Economic Empowerment Community of Practice, Financial Inclusion and Sustainable Entrepreneurship Thematic Working Group. So thank you very much for your time, Moses, today. And Moses will be speaking to us on the topic of addressing the intersecting financial needs and gender-based violence. Thank you, Moses. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm equally excited to be here today and to be able to share a few learnings from one of the programs that we've been able to implement. We've seen a lot of gaps existing within the financial ecosystem, and of course, opportunities to address some of those gaps as presented by Caroline. To begin with, we've got objectives for this program. And especially for participants who are here, something that we felt you should come out with from this, this learning session. One is to address or to look at ways in which Jasiri Fund was able to address the injustices within the financial sector that limit women's active participation in sustainable entrepreneurship, provide insights on a survivor fund's effectiveness as a tool for building resilience and reducing vulnerability to GBV survivors, contribute to systems change within the public sector and private sector spaces. And finally, we want to look at how more opportunities can be created for women to participate in the world of work. So basically, that is what we're going to see in the next slides. Next. Well, I'm going to okay. I'm going to walk us through what this Jasiri Fund is, why, okay, how the concept of Jasiri Fund came to exist, and up to where we are currently, and way forward past Jasiri Fund 1. So back in 2021, the leading partner, that is Center for Rights Education and Awareness, in collaboration with CCGD, that is Center for Gender and Development, and Roots Kenya, approached MasterCard Foundation to have a conversation around the increasing issues or concerns around gender-based violence that were being attributed to effects of COVID-19 then. And as a result of this, there was need to then support women who are entrepreneurs and had those that or whose businesses had been affected or impacted or negatively by COVID-19. And the majority of these women, or if I can say that all of them were survivors of gender-based violence. And something unique is that their businesses had also been impacted on by COVID-19. So they really struggled to keep afloat, and therefore something had to be done. So it is as a result of this that the three organizations approached MasterCard Foundation to see something that could be done. The existing financial ecosystem were producing or were developing products that were homogeneous in nature. And being that they were considering men's concern and women to be the same, they were coming up with products that were not suitable to address the unique needs of women. And looking at women in Nairobi and those in places like Mombasa, they are also quite different. So this is a factor or element that they failed to consider. So all this necessitated the co-creation and development of this kind of program. Let's move to the next slide. Jasiri Fund is a unique model. And what made Jasiri Fund be what it is pegged on its integrated approach. That is creating strong programming around the long-term recovery and resilience of survivors through GBV support services. And this was provided in addition to access to, utilization, and control of affordable financial resources that was critical for businesses to grow and for scale, especially those that were owned by women. So this element made Jasiri Fund a very unique product in the market. It's integrated approach, bringing in the GBV support services together with financial inclusion, that is access to quality financial services. So that made it unique in its nature. So here is a flow of the diagram that demonstrate how Jasiri Fund was implemented. So if you look at right from number one, there is the identification of the survivors of gender-based violence who had viable, no, that will come later. So we identified these women, conducted needs assessment. Then based on their needs, we went to stage 2, which was support services. These were GBV support services that included legal support, psychosocial support, shelter services, case management grant, dignity kit. So this was to position women mentally to be able to receive trainings on financial literacy, entrepreneurship, business management, and then let access finances. So after receiving that, to position them mentally, because these were people who were traumatized initially through gender-based violence, we went ahead to then identify those that had viable business ideas through their business plans. And they showed the need to be supported through finances, in the form of business grant and also in the form of credit. So after providing entrepreneurship opportunities, then we went ahead to provide the guarantee fund. So the guarantee fund is now the Jasiri credit or Jasiri fund, the survivors fund. So this was tailored to suit the unique needs of these survivors of gender-based violence, as we're going to see some of its features in the subsequent slides. Then we also went ahead to provide BDS support services, which they call technical assistance or mentorship support. This was to then help in handholding of these businesses that had received finances and had also been trained on how to keep records, manage their finances better, how to map, to do proper mapping of their customers, branding and all that. Then finally, we had the element of graduation, where with the Jasiri Fund, the graduation to us is identifying where opportunities exist in the market system and linking these women with these opportunities so that they're able to continue surviving in this space and, of course, growing and scaling up their businesses. So that is something that made Jasiri Fund unique. I would request we move to the next slide. Well, because we had mentioned that it's an integrated kind of approach to financial inclusion, I'm going to share some of the support services that these women received in addition to financial inclusion. So for example, on pro bono counseling services, 8326 survivors of gender-based violence were supported. And in their journey to recovery through shelter support services, 2,948 women were able to get this kind of support and 14 shelters were supported. And then we also see that for legal services, 10,013 women were supported and there was successful mediation to 3,310. And finally, 1,000 women were able to receive 15,000 Kenya shillings. So all these were provided as support services to these survivors. And some of them were entrepreneurs. And those entrepreneurs were the ones that were extracted from the main pool of these survivors so that they could then proceed to grow their businesses. So we move to the next slide. Well, here we want to look at the design of the Jasiri Fund. But before we get there, let's look at the counties where the project was piloted in. We have got 10 counties. As you can see, we had Nairobi, Kwale, Mombasa, Kilifi, Kakamega, Kiambu, Kajiado, and Garissa County. So these were 10 counties where the project was implemented in. And the project initially targeted 1,000 women who were survivors of gender-based violence. It also targeted young people and PWDs. So the project enabled these women to be able to borrow. Okay, the project targeted women who had already been in business for at least 3 months. And of course, they had been impacted negatively by COVID-19. So those were some of the basic criteria for one to access Jasiri Fund. And when we talk of the next phase, there are several other factors that have been introduced, and we'll be able to look at that later. So why is Jasiri Fund unique? We are looking at the products that were being developed in the market system by financial service providers. Some of these were homogeneous products. They were assuming that women's needs were same as men, and majority of them were failing to consider that there were various needs based on geographical locations that were unique to this kind of individuals. So with Jasiri Fund, when we start with the interest rate, it was offered below the commercial rate. As you can see, it was 8.38%. And there were no loan securities that were required for these women. There were no need for collateral because we initially noticed that these were some of the barriers that were limiting women from accessing these finances. The women were not also, it was also not mandatory for them to access these finances in groups. As an individual, one could access these finances. Then they were given loan grace period of up to 60 days for one to then be able to access finances, invest in their businesses, start realizing some interest or some proceeds from their businesses, then repay from their third month. Then minimum bank balance, there was no need for that. For Jasiri Fund, they were to, once they were recommended by the three implementing partners, the CRU, CCGD, and GRUTS Kenya, they were to just walk in there, be assessed further if they were credit worthy, and looking at their eligibility from the bank perspective. Of course, based on the guidelines that we had set, they were also to look at whether they were listed negatively on CRB and all that. And that was to help them determine the amount of loans that these women needed to invest. So there was no need for minimum requirement for them to be created for a bank account. And they were also allowed to save 2.5% of their loan amounts that they were borrowing. This amount they were to access at the end of the program. And finally, you can see integration of the fund. So we noticed that the fund could not work alone, in isolation from other programs. So we had to bring in the GBV support services. So this was uniquely tailored for survivors of gender-based violence. That's why this element was coming out strongly, as we saw in the model. Next slide. There were notable results from this project that I would like to walk us through. One is that the financial institutions like Kenya Women Finance Trust, where the fund was being hosted, the guarantee fund was hosted, post the intervention now approached these women and started to renegotiate their products and recalibrated them to suit the needs of these women. From 24% interest rate that they were offering, they were willing to then reduce this to up to 10%. And that could then now tell that they noticed that these women are bankable, they are able to grow their businesses, they could be trusted. These were people that could potentially help their businesses grow. And now there was that change in the financial ecosystem, enabling them to create products that could then suit these needs of these women. And something interesting, again, is that the government of Kenya, through the learnings that they received from Jasiri Fund, now was able to commit setting up a similar fund like Jasiri Fund. And if we look at the latest report by the government of Kenya on achievements around generation equality commitments, you'll realize that there is that commitment. It means that there is that kind of transformation that is happening, the systemic change. We had the systemic gender barriers within the financial ecosystem, and now the government is willing to take up something like this. And that is what we're going to hold government accountable on to be able to set up a similar fund like that. Then also in the financial sector, like we've seen in our first point, is that now there is willingness to sit down and listen and develop something that is able to suit the needs of these entrepreneurs. Then number three is that initially, like I stated, is that all these women were survivors of gender-based violence. But now when given this opportunity to access finances and their capacities built, them being able to create networks in the space and grab available opportunities. Now there was this element of now them gaining independence. There was aspect of power, voice, autonomy. Now they were able to even participate in certain critical decisions at the household level. Those that were regarded as burden to their abusive spouses or husbands were then now being accepted back, and they also had a choice to also move out and create something for themselves and the people that they love. So cases of gender-based violence reduced by 87% from the baseline studies that we conducted, baseline, midterm, and endline studies. So we noticed that women, if they're given opportunity to do business and resources are available, then definitely they are able to claim back their voices and they are able to become financially independent from abusive spouses. And also something interesting is that jobs were created by these businesses because they moved from a point of just wanting to survive in the space to now scaling up their businesses, being able to diversify, to also help adapt to the changing market ecosystem, especially based on the macroeconomic factors or trends that, in addition to COVID-19, were negatively impacted on their businesses. So 62% of these businesses created employment opportunities. So 544 jobs were created to women, young people that were in that age that were able to then participate in meaningful work. Then something else is that, like I mentioned initially, is that these women were less confident before because of the trauma that they had been through. But having moved through those stages of support, now there was much confidence among these women, and they were then able to participate in matters that were critical to them, especially making critical decisions to be able to create a gender responsive business spaces that could then allow their businesses to thrive. So that is also something we saw. And in addition to this is that we've got quite a number of our women that transitioned to other programs. Like we've got women that are now being absorbed by Women Creating Wealth project by Gracia Marshall Trust. We were able to build their capacity, and now they are able to move to other spaces. And this is something that we've been able to see. And one survivor that was supported was then able to support 10 women. And this was Evelyn Maweu, to be able to set up other businesses. So these are some of the success stories that we are able to see, that support one woman to be able to set up a business. Then that's an opportunity to support more than 2 women. And that is something that we've seen. Let's move to the next slide. Some critical lessons were also learned during the implementation of phase 1 of Jasiri Fund project. And one is that an integrated approach to women's economic empowerment is key to a more responsive and survivor-centered financial ecosystem. So this basically helps to shape the way products are being developed, products that are non-homogeneous, products that suit the needs of survivors of gender-based violence, those that are affordable and of high quality, giving women opportunity to access, utilize, and eventually to own these things, these earnings and assets that they acquire as a result of the businesses that they are doing from the support they receive. Number two is that we saw that there was need to develop and adopt context-specific solutions to address various constraints to women's economic participation. So these context-specific solutions were to be based on the specific needs of these women, not assuming that their needs are similar to those of men, and that women in urban setups needs are same as those from the rural or peri-urban spaces. So this was something we noticed. And just linking with point one is that as you support this group of women, you need to bring in GBV support services to financial inclusion. And this is to help them be in the right state of mind, and also to help them get justice where need be, in the event that perpetrators continue to, of course, infringe their rights. So that is why that is very critical. Something else that we notice is that there is need to utilize disaggregated data to generate evidence on effective strategies under the project to drive positive transformation within the financial space. And this would facilitate the creation and the structuring of survivor-centered financial services and products. So data is critical. From what Caroline just presented, we saw there were a number of gaps. Women not able to read SMS and read and interpret at 60% compared to their male counterparts. So that data is critical in providing financial literacy training, and also looking at the digital financial infrastructure, the data that was provided, access to mobile payment services, P2P payment opportunities for women, and any other available opportunities. So data is very critical. So they will help in making informed decisions around programming in this space of financial inclusion. And finally, is need to recalibrate investment strategies and invest more in women-owned enterprises. For if one woman is empowered, we've seen from Jasiri women, they are able to create more opportunities. There is that element of ripple impact or effect. So majority of women are able to then benefit from this. So if the opportunity to invest in institutions that are working around creating this affordable financial resources to women, and also researching around this thematic area to unpack the existing gaps and opportunities, then that is welcome to support this group of women. Now, as I wind up, I would also like to inform my audience that, or our audience that we've now transitioned to phase 2 of Jasiri Fund. And initially it was a $350 million project. That is 30 million, thereabout 30 million Kenya shillings. To now around, Jasiri Fund is going to be around 800 million Kenya shillings for women, young people, PWDs, and it's going to be in 2 tiers. One for those we call startups with business ideas that needs to be funded, meaning they're not in business and they want to buy business assets. We categorize that category under business grants. So those ones, having been trained on financial literacy, they'll be able to access business grants. So that will be over 11,000 women. And then now the second category will be entrepreneurs that will by then be having existing businesses that have been in the space for over 3 months. So this will be able to give them opportunity to access this affordable credit facility in addition to BDS support services to be able to continue thriving in the space. So a total of 22,000 entrepreneurs from 1,000. So that tells that there is something that is happening. And if government also puts up a similar fund like this, and the financial institutions, we are going to move from 1 now to 3. If they are able to then now tailor make their products to suit or recalibrate their products to suit the needs of the survivors, then more women will be able to then access such kind of opportunities to invest and grow. So let's see if there is something else. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that presentation, Moses. And it's fantastic to see what's impact looking at the needs of women through an intersectional lens, and and the cross-cutting issues that that impact them in different spaces that that they occupy. And of course, I think one of the key things that you mentioned as well is the snowball effect of supporting women and how that extends to the wider community of women across different places. And just lastly on that, just the fact that there was system change that was observed. This is, of course, an opportunity or a catalyst, really, for investing in similar models that are looking at a more integrated approach. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so we'll move on to our final speaker. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Rose Marati-Murithi. Rose is a lecturer at University of Nairobi, and she is also the University of Nairobi Women's Economic Empowerment Coordinator for the Business Incubation Project. In addition to her extensive experience in academia, Rose is also an executive coach on entrepreneurship, and works with business startups to support them to grow and thrive. So welcome, Rose. Rose will be speaking to us on women's business incubation models. Thank you. Sorry, I had my camera off. Welcome, Rose. You might be on mute.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. My name is Rose, has just been introduced, and I'm just speaking about what WeHub is doing with women in terms of financial inclusion. We have, at the University, we have what you call African Women's Studies Center. It's a research center. Our leader is Professor Wajiko Kabira, and we have a women business incubation where we are incubating 320 women in 17 counties, and you're working with 17 collectives in 12 counties. The women groups doing different type of businesses. And so our model of incubating the women is we work with individual women in business, and we also work with women groups or women collectives doing business. It's a journey that we have worked with these women through our partners. How we implement our model is through partnership, and the main and the reason, our main objective, or the overriding objective of the project, is to assess the extent to which women-focused incubation models contribute to the growth of business enterprises in Kenya. And specifically, the incubation we have developed is to ensure that we can test if incubating women businesses in a women business incubation can work for women to scale up their business. So at the beginning, we did a baseline survey to find out where these women, either individual rent or collectives, where their business is at the point of beginning. And then after 6 months, we've been able to do our first monitoring and evaluation. And at the end of the incubation, we're going to find out where these women are. It's a research project whereby we were able at the beginning to find out what are the issues that are making women not excel in business. And we actually, after picking up the issues, we're able to now come up with a curriculum that is addressing the needs of the women and the strategies that women are facing so that they're not able to grow their business. And after these interventions, we developed a curriculum and we came up with an incubation model. Our incubation model has got 5 pillars. And the first pillar is access to finance, access to markets, technology. We've got mentorship, and we also have the final one on the final one is leakages, leaking the networks and leaking the women into the various spaces where women can be supported. And maybe I can go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay. Excellent. So definitely, when we did our baseline survey, we discovered that most women, there is so much that has been done by our government, our financial institutions to ensure that women can access funding. But we were missed when we carried out our baseline survey, we collected data, analyzed the data, we discovered that more than half of the women businesses, they actually are not able to access funds. And the women want to do business. They're very keen in empowering themselves because we know that of more than half of the 48% of small, macro, and medium enterprises, they are held by women and they are contributing a lot to the GDP of the country. And so we find a lot of women are in business, in that space. But unfortunately, because of many challenges, most of them are not able to access funding as compared with their counterparts men. And so we've tried to incubate 320 women through our partner TechnoServe, and then around 17 counties, we partnered with Tech Crown Trust. And we started working the journey to see the way that we can be able to build their capacity so that they're able maybe to be able to uptake the financial support for. Able to, on top of that, we were able to now to interact or to collaborate with the various institutions so that we can actually be able to see that all the issues we are able to discover. Because, for example, even if you get the money, and for example, let's say you're doing, let's say you're working with banana, you're selling bananas. We find that bananas have their own challenge. For example, I'll give you an example. Because these women, what happened that their banana belong to women in Meru or in the Rakanede and other parts of the country. But banana, what the middlemen do, they take advantage of the women. They just decide that these women, they will have a way of just buying the bananas at very low prices. So the women, at the end of the day, they go at a loss. So we decided the best thing to do is to do the value addition for the banana. And all the banana, we partnered with KAE and Clarity and decided now what we're going to do is these women, we're going to have value addition for the banana. So how are the banana? They can do banana clips, they can do banana flour, and they can also do the banana fiber. And they do so that they can do the sanitary towels, they can do mats, they can do baskets, and also they do fertilizer, organic fertilizer, so that they can actually use the organic fertilizer to grow their crops and reduce the cases of cancer that we have in that zone. And so through that, now we realize now when they have the skills and they have now what they have, they can actually now be able to now be able to partake the finances from the various partners that I would mention. And because now they have a product, they have a skill. And the product has a market because we also ensure that we standardize that particular product and they get the CAPE certificates. We do not just start by having them a product, and we get a mentor to work with them. And so through that, let me go to the next slide. I can go to the next slide. So our implementation of the incubation model. One of I just mentioned, one of the pillars is access to finances. So we were so intentional about this particular because we realized there's so much training that is going on women, but the women, after they give the training, they do not know what to do next. So we became so intentional about mentorship that once we've done the training, they have their CAPE certificates in all the 12 correctives. Because I said we're in Turkana, where they are doing processing flour. We're in Kisumu, where they're doing fish, small and big. We're in Busia. We're in Kware, where they're doing cashew nuts. In Kirifi, where the women are doing cassava. We're in Kitwihane. We're in Machakos chicken. we're in Meru, Banana, Handrakanithi, we're in Kajiando. We are trying to follow the traditional crop that naturally belongs to the women. As you know, like in Maasai land, cows belong to men, but the milk belongs to the women. And so how can we vary hand the milk for the women so that out of the milk they can have yogurt, they can have cheese, they can have, mala, they can have pasteurized milk, and be able to even to sell to the schools, because there's an ongoing program by the government that is going on so the women can benefit and feed their own children. So now through that, we've been able to find out what are the available affirmative funds found for women. And so we have been able to work with our various affirmative funds like WEF, that is Women Enterprise Fund, and to see to it that we have the Enterprise Fund, we have our collaboration to see to it that they speak to the women and so that women can know how to access this money. We'll be able to talk to GAF through the office of the women left in every county. Because of sustainability of the project, we've been able to interact with them, tell them what the women are doing so that they can also be able to support the women, because we know for the GAF, it's a grant, so it's a soft landing for women. And because the women, what they're doing is something that has a social impact in society, whatever they're doing is something that they can apply to other women. So GAF is very keen on supporting them. So we looked in the county government to see to that. And out of that, we find that there is so much. So I can mention about the findings. I would give another introduction that we ensure that we've also worked across the many banks that have the credit guarantee scheme where women are supposed to be benefiting. And we are partnering or talking to 9 banks that are willing. And one very example, I would give a very good example of Equity Bank, where we are currently ensuring that women can access the funding. They have very good products like for women, whereby for example, it's a women bank where, for example, if a woman goes on maternity, they get a waiver the time they're in maternity, they don't have to pay the loan, and then they also get a grace period when it's the new startup. And so the women are able now to borrow without the fear of having now the negative impact of borrowing money from the loans. So the findings I can say from our research, we find that we're getting a lot of business counter support when it comes to having the women, access the gap of the grants that are meant for the women through the county. We got a lot of individual women realizing that if they form groups, they can actually be able to support each other, to network and access some of the money, like where you can only get the money if you belong to a group. And when they're in a group, they can voice their issues, they can be able to support each other, do what is best. I've mentioned about the banks. We follow the banks that have the credit guarantee scheme for women, trying to see that can women access these loans without much of issues, because the women do not have collateral to get this money. And we've been able to see that has been really working. We've also realized that we have been partnered with most of the financial institutions that they can actually provide financial literacy training, because women do not have much access to information because of nature of their work. They are overwhelmed because of family issues, they're taking care of the children, their husbands. So we are really trying to see, can they get information that when they get this money, they can now be able to use the money well and be able to repay the money. I can go to the next slide. Yes, and we've also discovered that what we need to do, one of the things we need to do when it comes to women, one of the things we need to do is we have to mitigate the revenue fluctuation, because we are living in a country where, especially now we are transitioning, we need to see to it, how do we, given the challenges experienced by business, such as the political unrest and the decision of, fluctuations, there is need to develop strategies to mitigate the revenue fluctuation so that the women that are in business do not suffer. So we are trying to just discover ways and means with women. How do we operate in this landscape of where there is a lot of the economic situation is still finding its bearing? So we are trying to do this of some of the reasons that we are running. We're also learning that facilitating the sharing of best practices among business of all sizes where women are can enhance living performance, ensure business sustainability. That's one of the findings that we have. We're also ensuring that all that we are gathering about, for example, where we're expecting to have affirmative funds, and maybe the women still have strategies of getting these funds, how do we now speak out what is the issues that women are having, so that we can also inform policy makers, or we can do policy advocacy. We can inform the relevant government institution on the issues that are happening. We're also trying to ensure that we are speaking to the county government, the national government, and telling them these are the policies that have been, the entrepreneurial policies that are there, or SME policies, they're gender sensitive, but then they don't seem to be working for the women. So how best can we think around them and have the voice of the women and into it? Because the people know their real issues, and therefore that they can be able to change the whole scenario. Another lessons we are learning is collaborating with the national and the county governments, relevant government bodies, and organization can bring to policy change that supports women, because sometimes the national government, the county government are not aware of what is on the ground. So when we get this information and they're willing to partner with us and work with us as an institution, especially the fact that they can leverage on the kind of data that we are collecting and the kind of findings that we're getting, it can help them to make more informed decisions that can change the whole scenario. And also raising the awareness of affirmative action plans, providing one-on-one training to women entrepreneurs is critical. This includes understanding where have these, how can the women access funds like WEV, Women Enterprise Fund, GAF? How can the women access things like WESO Fund, Youth Enterprise Fund? Because these are funds that have been set aside to support women or the disadvantaged, group or gender, like women, youth, and people living with disability. We're also doing a lot of research to see, does the AGOP work for women? We know that 30% has been set aside for women to procure services or do business in the government. Are they really managed? Is the 30%, has it been taken up by the women? But out of the data we are collecting and all of we realize that it's the women are being minimal. They are not able to do even the 30%, and know the women are even privileged. They not only have the 30%, they have the 70%, but unfortunately they're not able to access the 70%. So we realize that there is need for continuous financial literacy and linkages with financial institutions, government affirmative funds, and create guarantee schemes and commercial. But there's so much that we have to do for us to wake up one day and say that we talk about financial inclusion for women is there, because I just said from the findings, there's a real gap. A lot needs to be done. We had just mentioned, do our other pillars, that is the technology transform, all our collectives. Right now, they have 4 products out of their traditional clubs that are naturally or traditionally they're entitled to their community, like the Kirifi women, they're there doing the cassava. They have 4 products from then how do they, they're looking at it, how can they start up cottage industries within Kirifi, where all the women in Kirifi can bring in their cassava crop and process the cassava so that they can do very hard, and so that they can be able to create more wealth or sell the products at a profit to benefit other women and to empower the women. If you look at Kikwari, we are there looking at the cashew nuts. It's a traditional crop for women. How do we process the cashew nuts and then ensure that women have products, like 4 products? And I just mentioned through a partnership with Kidri is doing value addition for 8 of our collectives, all the way from Kware, Kirifi, Kitui, Kisumu, for the small fish, the bigger fish, and all the in Busia. With Kenya Industrial Estate, we are partnering with them to do the value addition of technology transfer for women in Meru, in Rakanithi, in Kajiado, Visija and Kajiado. And what we want is we're following the traditional club that the women are naturally entitled, that we don't have to struggle with the space, and therefore to ensure that we do value addition. And out of every club, they are at least able to get 4 clubs, and all of them are standardized, and they get certification for KEBS, and they can get into the departments And we've been able to showcase their product through the platform of our partners, through their website, through exhibitions, through Women Economic Forum, so that these women, what the product they're producing, we can be able to access markets. And when there are markets, we find that they can actually be able now go beyond their success to finance, but use their finance to finance their cottage industry, but that is buy the equipment for processing and all the same. Because even if you train the women, you leave them there, and there's money at their doorstep, did not know what else to do with the money. So through mentorship, we partnered with the mentor that we're now mentoring the women to situate. Now they'll actually start off their cottage industry right at the village. And therefore they can actually now buy clothes from other women, and they buy clothes from the other women, they can process the women, and they, because already they have the CAP certificates, this product can get to the departments or the supermarkets, and they can also export. In fact, what we're thinking is, how do they partner with them? One of our mentors that exports our product to the country. And so what will happen that even the government are farming the funds that are available for women, the women now will be able to uptake and go beyond that and use it to be able to deliver what's. So the incubation seems to be taking shape, and I just want to mention, like, for example, the two pictures that are at the end of the restaurant. Here is a partnership we have with Equity Bank. We had met Equity Bank so that we can see if our women can be the first to benefit from their women bank, where I mentioned when you go on maternity, you have a leeway to go nurse your baby, and then you come back and now pick from where you are started. And this last one is where the press, one of our director of intellectual property at the University of Nairobi, Professor Mary Kinoti, is receiving now one from the president, because the last year Women International Day that was held at Nairobi, we got the best award. We awarded the best award for financial inclusion because we've been able to do so much, interact and collaborate with most of the institutions, including all affirmative funds. We have followed them and the banks to see that the women can access money and be able to now empower themselves and create wealth for this nation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Rose, for that that presentation and sharing with us the process and the learnings from the activities that have been undertaken by UN. Just in the interest of time, I will just introduce Wanza, who will be our discussant for this learning process. And we'll just give Wanza a very quick introduction. Wanza Mbole is a senior economic advisor and gender lead for financial sector deepening. She's also the chair for the Women's Economic Empowerment Community of Practice, Financial Inclusion and Sustainable Entrepreneurship Thematic Working Group. Wanza brings extensive experience across both informal and formal sectors, and work that cuts across financial sectors and non-financial sectors, which are developed for the implementation of women's economic empowerment programs. So I will hand over to Wanza. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Rhoda, and to every participant, and particularly to the speakers who've gone ahead of me. Mine is to try and call out some of the important things that have come out of the presentations that they've made, and which hopefully we are going to find time to discuss before the session concludes. And I'll start off by touching on some of the things that came out of Caroline's presentation. And thanks, Caroline, for just helping us to understand the financial inclusion gap. And of important mention is the fact that based on the overall numbers, there doesn't seem to be much of a gap. When you start talking about an 80% financial inclusion level, it seems pretty good. And yet, as you get to see, it might not be as good as it sounds, because most of that is driven by mobile money. M-Pesa, Airtel Money, and others that we know about. And we know their impact in relation to women's economic empowerment is limited. So in as much as men and women might seem to be at par, the fact that use of informal things like the chamas, the roscas, and others is coming down, that's not necessarily an indication that the gap is effectively being closed when we start to look at what meaningful financial inclusion can be. So just to call out some of the numbers that came out of that, and if I mention a figure that you didn't see, then it's from the report that Caroline spoke to, and the link that was shared earlier. So when you look at, for instance, when you look at, as already mentioned, the gap between men and women in relation to general formal access, that's minimal. It's only 4%. Then when you start to drill down into that and look at the excluded, again, numbers that she shared, it's relatively the same, 11.3% for women and 10.8% for men. So, and then we get to look at, we start to look at other things that matter, because if we are talking about what could make or break women's economic empowerment, then we have to go beyond the overall access numbers. Access is basically having an account, and in this case, the mobile money accounts. So I found myself asking, what would happen, or what would the numbers look like if we removed mobile money? Would we still be talking of near equal access for men and women to accounts? I'm using access to accounts. I'll speak to the usage later to the extent possible. And the outright answer is no. So, and we're sure to have cases of people who have, to stick to mobile money as the biggest driver of that, people who have mobile money accounts, but they have minimal amounts of money sitting there. I know mobile money does wonders when it comes to payment, but the sort of things that really matter for economic empowerment might not be cared for by that, in as much as that is important. And so moving on to some of the things that have been mentioned, particularly by Rose, allow me to use your first names only, by Rose and Moses, in speaking to interventions that have made a difference. We know that it's important for women to access the information, which ties into Caroline's mention of financial advice. And yeah, not surprising, unlike men, women tend to rely on family and friends to get advice. And we found the same when FSD Kenya carried out a gendered financial product survey on urban retail traders. What we heard from them was that they rely on friends and family for advice. You can market all you want, you can preach all you want, but they almost would hear. The people they listen to at the end of the day is their family and their friends. And that goes to say that as we talk about financial literacy, I'm trying to separate that from marketing in as much as they are in a way related. That says that that family and friends, especially the men who seem to seek them more and probably understand it better, given the gap in literacy, whether basic literacy or financial literacy, can be good avenues or allies for financial literacy. And the other bit that came out of the presentation by Caroline was the whole financial health discussion. And there is a real gap. For instance, from the numbers that she shared, it shows that that deteriorated for women, that deteriorated between 2019 and 2021 from 19% to 15%. And yeah, the same happened for men, deteriorating from 23% to 19%. And yes, so the gap remains. And so when certain things happen, and I forget exactly where that figure was, it could be one of the things that either Rose or Moses spoke to, when certain things happen, certain shocks like a COVID, which was a systemic and major shock, women get more of a beating than men because they are already unequally predisposed to occurrences like those. So just moving on to what women are using in relation to dealing with financial needs. And those financial needs are organized around just managing day to day, dealing with shocks, and meeting future goals. I do not want to go into the detail of this because Caroline touched on it, and the report is available. But when we look at that, we realize that women are they use totally different financial instruments. For instance, women, you tend to use informal. And so, and I find myself asking, in as much as we know, or the general view globally is that formal is better, and for us, the face of formal is mobile money. Why is it that women tend to use the groups and the chamas more? What is it that those chamas deliver? And I'll try to speak to that in a moment. And what can the formal, especially the mainstream financial institutions, borrow from the informal to make their products or financial services more value adding to women? And some of the things we've heard from users or women who use informal groups is that those groups deliver much more than finance. They serve as they amplify their networks in all sorts of areas. It would be where the women go to or find advice on matters business, matters family, and all other sorts of things, and not to leave out health, mental health, and so forth. And if someone can find a solution that does much more than just meet the economic need, why not? And so it's things like those that the mainstream financial service providers will need to be concerned of, and to provide avenues or to enhance their solutions with avenues for that. In relation to dealing with risks and shocks, the same gap remains. And one thing that came out of the presentation by Caroline was some needs are more gendered than others. Like managing day to day seems to be a woman need. And we have a gap there. And I couldn't help asking myself, could it be that the gap for men is, or the men seem to be doing better in that regard because they do not necessarily meet those day-to-day needs. Top among those was putting food on the table. And that we know the same goes for caregiving and so forth. And so in as much as we might not be able to shift the gender norms overnight, could the providers of financial services be able to come up with solutions that speak to those needs? And some of those, like in relation to healthcare, could be health insurance. Instead of this woman digging into her pocket, and that could be the capital for her small business, to meet a healthcare need, would a tailored health insurance solution help her cope better with that sort of a health shock, especially given that she's to take a child to hospital anyway. And so those are some of the key things that came out of these. And moving on to what we heard about Jasiri, I start by appreciating that integrated approaches to building financial inclusion can be quite meaningful for women's economic empowerment. And among some of the things that I heard Moses say, or that I learned from Jasiri, and I'll keep crisscrossing Jasiri with the work that the UN We Hub is doing, is that there are many things that matter for women's economic empowerment, and these are not necessarily isolated or separate elements. They are quite integrated. And the way I look at it is this way. If financial inclusion or finance is supposed to be a facilitator for economic empowerment, just like access to market, and in this instance, I'm talking about non-financial market. That's a key part of just ensuring that the business is running well and that the return on the business is optimal. But on the other hand, we hear that those not using those with limited access or not using some financial instruments like a savings don't do that because they have limited income. So it's a reciprocal sort of relationship. So while finance is needed to make the business do well, looking at business as a source of economic empowerment, then the same business is needed to fuel further financial inclusion or use of more sophisticated financial instruments. And so without a well-integrated approach to financial inclusion, it's almost impossible to have to realize the results or the impact that we anticipate in relation to women's economic empowerment. The other thing that came out of the experience that Moses shared was the security-free loans. And we know that women have less assets than men. And assets that can be used to secure their borrowing, which tends to be typical of a typical requirement by the formal financial service providers, and probably one of the reasons that drive them to the informal financial service providers, like the groups which can use social capital, the relationships that women have for collateral. And again, to mention the various aspects of non-financial interventions that made a difference, and I'm speaking to both Jasiri and what Rose shared with the trainings on business management, financial literacy, mentorship, and so forth. So those are crucial in driving women's economic empowerment. And besides those positive things, and I know I've not done justice to that at all, I believe we were all listening and we'll be able to engage with what we heard from the presenters a little bit more as we go on. I couldn't help wondering, and Moses, thanks for speaking to that towards the end. I couldn't help wondering, how could this beautiful work, both by the UN and under Jasiri, how could that be scaled and sustained beyond the current projects or development initiatives that are underway? What do we hear from those we've been partnering with, especially the financial service providers, in relation to taking this forward? And if you allow me, I'll share some experience of work that we did in the past in Marsabit. It wasn't totally, it's interesting that the things that seem to be making a difference are sort of packaged the same. You have the networking, you have the mentoring stroke coaching, you have the linkage to markets, both financial and non-financial, and whatever other beef that we had that I might have forgotten. And so when those are put together, and more so when they are sequenced in a particular way, as we seem to hit, as I picked or seem to pick from Moses's presentation, then they can be quite impactful. But I think there is a need for deliberateness to have this sustained beyond the project interventions. For instance, in relation to Jasiri phase 1, even phase 2, we partnering with the financial service providers that we are working with. Do we know what their strategic plan is beyond the current phase? And what are they doing to ensure that they can continue to provide financial services to the women that we are working with beyond beyond the project interventions? And back to my Marsabit example. So we partner with Equity Bank, and it's interesting that we keep hearing sort of the same names, which kind of point us to where there could be an interest to do something beyond the normal day-to-day financial service provision. And so we partner with, I won't start with partner with Equity Bank, but yes, they came in after we had done the many other things similar to what has been mentioned. They came in to leverage the mobilization of the women, which was part of the project, and the linkage to non-finance markets where they could access inputs and sell their products as part of the businesses they were doing, and the coaching and mentoring that was going on with those groups just to build their confidence. And that was one of the things that I found myself considering as I listened to Rose. When is it just awareness that's needed, or do these women do we need to move beyond just letting them know that we have these many funds, like a women enterprise fund and so forth, or this bank offers this solution to building their confidence, for their confidence to engage with both the financial and non-financial market systems. And so towards the end of the Marsabit work, Equity Bank had tested the credibility of these women. They had learned how to work with them, and they were able to continue lending beyond that short project that we implemented in Marsabit. And I believe the same is possible with Jasiri and the work that the UN we have is doing. And just to summarize it, in the interest of time, my questions for us to consider either in this forum or to take away is, how can we create a gender inclusive financial system, and what would that look like? What would that look like? How can the interventions that are making a difference economically to women be scaled and sustained? And Rhoda, to respect your time, I want to leave us with this quote borrowed from someone and paraphrased. If all we are giving, or if all the financial service providers are giving their clients, that is the women we care about, is finance or loans, then they are lending to fail. It's the integrated approaches to building meaningful financial inclusion systems that are making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that summary and helping us understand the framing from the different speakers and the wider context ones, and also leaving us with that quote, which is very powerful and gives us a lot of food for thought. As we are wrapping up, we have we're running out of time a little bit, but all the conversations have been incredibly important and insightful. We'll just allow for a couple of questions that have been presented in the meeting chat. So I'll just start by running through them. So first one is for Moses. Gaetana, who asked this question, had to leave a little bit early for another meeting, but I'm sure, in fact, this is quite a relevant question to respond to for the rest of the group as well. So the question was, financial institutions are reluctant to lend to women who are starting businesses because they feel women are not credit worthy. So in addition to helping institutions understand women's business more and loan guarantees, was de-risking of women's businesses. So for instance, business development support, skills training, etc., part of the program. Moses, are you there? Okay, well, okay.
Good. Yeah. So could you kindly repeat the question?
Absolutely. So the question was around financial institutions not feeling that women, especially women who are starting businesses, are credit worthy. So in addition to helping institutions understand businesses or women's businesses more, what other activities were included as part of this program, if any? So for instance, business development support and skills training. So the additional support that would de-risk women and the business.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'd like to state very well that in addition to skilling, there is a lot more that we were able to provide under BDS, Business Development Support Services. We had a team, a supportive team that were providing technical assistance to these women, ensuring that they understand the legal environment within the financial and market ecosystem for them to then be able to know how the system operates and how to position themselves for these available opportunities that are also limited. Something else is that the team were able to, of course, regularly also have meetings with these women, what we call quarterly review or feedback sessions, where these women are then able to share their learnings, their experiences, challenges. Then they were able to also learn from, we encourage peer-to-peer learning, where if one is struggling, then they are able to get, they could be coached by their peers who are doing better in the space. So that is something that made it unique, because we also learned that there are a number of products out there like just tailored, seem almost like Jasiri, but they were struggling to achieve the performance that we've seen with Jasiri Fund. So this is an element that was critical to us. The technical assistance support, mentorship, then peer-to-peer learning was very key. Then we brought them closer to each other so that they could support each other in addition to trainings that we were offering. And we also had time with the financial institution. We sat down with the evidence on why they should invest in these women, develop or restructure their products that could meet the specific needs of these women. And from those conversations that we were having with the financial institution as well, we were able to see all this manner of transformation. Much as it was not big, but there is something that is happening in the space currently.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Moses. I'm just going to move on to a question for Rose from Nicolene. The question is, who contributes to the Kenyan Women Guarantee and Trust Fund? And the second question from her is how those government and private sector contributors, are they independent, or are they in a mutually supportive, or do they mutually support ways to contribute to women's financial inclusion for economic empowerment?
Thank you so much. I'd like to go first. Looking at the financial ecosystem that we are in, the development partner space and all this, something that is happening is that we all know that there are systemic gendered barriers in the space. So one way to address or to lessen all this is by ensuring that a transformative approach is adopted. And one way of doing this was through the product that was developed with support from MasterCard Foundation. So the donor or the development partner here is MasterCard Foundation, which was keen in seeing this kind of transformation so that the financial ecosystem could be more gender responsive in the manner in which they were developing their products. Now, the government of Kenya, we've seen there are quite a number of products that are existing out there, WEF, women's, WEF opportunities and the rest, the Hustler Fund and all that. But looking at all this, if someone tells an entrepreneur that Hustler Fund exists there, go and you can access to 1 million. It's very tricky. It's not easy. So the government currently, we're having conversation with them through Jasiri Fund, and they have acknowledged it and they have established it in a paper. So the push is that they should be able to create something like Jasiri. So this product, Guarantee Fund product, it's like a venture capital or a development partner or investor who wants to see impact is then now able to, in collaboration with implementing partners like Crew Kenya, FSD, University of Nairobi, WeHub, and the rest. They're able to then approach them, have a discussion, look at the data on gaps that exist and the opportunities to invest in them. Then now they're able to bring in these opportunities to extend to women to be able to grow economically through entrepreneurships.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Moses. I'm just going to pass on the next question for Rose from Josephine, where she asks, and obviously lauds the initiatives that promote women's financial inclusion without collateral constraints. Rose, are there from your experience and knowledge, are there parallel efforts addressing access to land and property? As of course, this is an aspect equally crucial for fostering a more inclusive and equitable financial environment.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Moses. I like the way Moses has answered about where the government is really is very intentional to see that women have able to access funds that are friendly to women, especially the fact that they are disadvantaged differently from men. Just to answer the question you're asking about now, the issues to address that, I happen to interact with one of the specialists. As we have in Western Nairobi, we got all professionals, from lawyers, from economists, from psychologists. We have, being institutional of higher running, we have all the professionals within the space. And I know this one particular one who is very keen to see to it that if we can speak in the laws of Kenya, especially when it comes to owning land in Kenya, because it's a tall order in Kenya. And I think there's a lot of progress, and maybe there's something I may not have the authority to present as she would, because I know she's the authority, the same being a lawyer, but it's something we can avail data and information, because a lot has been researched on the same. As institutional learning, we leverage a lot on collecting data, analyze the data, so that whatever information you're giving out there is authentic. So that is something we can share, but a lot is speaking to that, because we want women to be at the same, at par with men, and if anything, to be able to surpass already what is being done. Government is intentional. I can see they're trying, as bosses have said, especially when it comes to affirmative funds. There is so much, but I think the issue is like we had moved like with the way of women enterprise fund. Some women were beyond 750 to a million. Now we are going back to zero. So with the discussion we have in the government, how can we go back where we were and not start afresh? Because we're not taking the women back, won't move them forward. And a lot is happening, a lot of discussion, but I like the way the banks, like you just mentioned, I like her discussion. She just mentioned that Equity Bank believed in them. It's like, Native Bank believed in them. KCB Bank believed in the women. There's a lot actually. You can work most of the bank and find the SME, especially for women, and you can just have money without having 7 million. So there is a lot of that happening, but I think in terms of like the way then for the women, for us to cushion so that they also do not get these funds and find themselves struggling and suffering and discourage other women, we need to we need to bring in many things. Like I said, the model that we have got other actors or other pillars beyond finance that we ensure that by the time the women are accessing money, they're in a position to use the money and be able to repay the loan. But I'll maybe ask in time we can avail data on land and collateral and about women, and also more that what we are gathering from the banks. When must they have this from women? Maybe they need a title deed, they need whatever. We can avail more information. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I'm going to hand over to Nduta, who is going to give the closing remarks as we come to the end of our learning session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rhoda, and thank you so much, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. It's been quite a great session with very refreshing presentations, right from our Kenya statistics on the financial inclusion that has brought to the fore the disparities for women in terms of their access and also their use of the different financial services, but also the interesting and the quite unique interventions that are being run by CRU and by the University of Nairobi, the intervention on Jasiri about supporting survivors of GBV with financial, interventions. And of course, the University of Nairobi's women business incubation model that has no doubt made impact in terms of increasing women's literacy and raising their capacities and abilities to access and use the finances for their empowerment based on what we've been able to learn today. So on behalf of ICRW and the Women Economic Empowerment Community of Practice, I would like to take this opportunity to especially thank all of us for taking time to attend this session and to contribute to the learnings by listening in, by asking questions, by sharing your thoughts and reflections on today's very powerful topic. And especially allow me to thank our moderator, Rhoda Maina, for the great moderation, for leading us, for guiding us into the sessions and into the different facets of the program of the day. Please receive our sincere appreciation for the great execution on that role. Our presenters today have been very fantastic. Caroline from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Moses from CRU, Rose from the UON we have, and our very able discussant, Wanza from FST Kenya. You've all been awesome, and we would want to extend appreciation for the time that you have taken to help us prepare for this session, right from developing the concept note and building up that for shaping up the session. And I know it's been quite a journey, especially for Wanza and Moses, who are both the co-chairs for the Financial Inclusion Thematic Working Group of the WCOP. So thanks so much for taking time off your busy schedules to prepare, the very detailed presentations and discussions. And of course, for being here today to speak about the great work that you're doing and sharing your insights with us from all the work that you've been doing. So there are so many issues that have come out, from this session. Of course, there are lots of dots that we need to connect and to tie, just like Wanza has alluded in her summary. And of course, there's in all this that for us to be able to successful, there would be need for lots of collaborations and partnerships that would be needed to take the work forward. And we do hope that our individual work and even collectively as a community of practice, that's comprised of researchers and practitioners, we can continue to engage even beyond this session and use the platforms such as the community of practice to share more about our research, our programming, what we are learning, and how we can utilize the different lessons to inform practice and also to inform policy. And importantly, how we can all amplify the voices of the women and the plight of the women and even the men, and make impactful change in their lives. So we thank you all so much, and without further much ado, please allow me to wish you a very great evening and a great day for those on a different time zone. So thank you so much. See you again. We will be sharing the recording from this session, and we hope that you continue to engage and to interact as we take the work forward. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.